Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo. And Hex, it's been a while since we've let an MMO wrap its tentacles around our souls.
Yes, but this week we got pulled back in with Dungeons & Dragons Neverwinter.
And Goose looks at how gaming addiction is being classified by the medical profession.
Psychology and behavioural medicine has a lot to offer. Instead of simply saying to people, you should stop, we can say, you know what? Sometimes it's very hard to stop.
Plus, we make some space under the TV for a brand new console. Oh, that was such a fluke!
Yes, is it worth taking up one of the coveted HDMI ports in the back of our TVs? But first, can you guess the sound for this week?
News time.
Good game.
Some players assumed a phone number found on a poster within The Last of Us would direct them towards an Easter egg, only to find the number put them through to the hottest sex line in America.
You want to explain this?
Naughty Dog apologised, saying it was an honest mistake they had assumed by simply changing a random phone number's area code to 555, it would invalidate the number, since that is a common trick used in movies and television. The game has since been patched and offending posters removed.
Sorry, I didn't mean for this.
Don Mattrick, the president of Microsoft's Interactive Entertainment division for more than 6 years, has left the company.
It's all about games.
Mattrick now has taken up the position of CEO at Zynga, while Zynga's former CEO, Mark Pincus, will be stepping aside to focus on product development. Following the announcement of a Mad Max game currently being developed by Just Cause creators Avalanche Studios, many were disappointed to hear the game's characters were being voiced by Americans. In response to the community backlash, the studio has reversed their decision and confirmed they will now be hiring Australian voice actors for the game. And in somewhat dubious news, a forum post has revealed an accidental AI experiment has led to some rather interesting results. The post tells a story of a Quake 3 server being set up to host 16 bots in a deathmatch game. The bots, however, were running a special adaptive AI routine that could learn and develop the most efficient tactics. The user apparently forgot about the server for years. After remembering and investigating the server, the player found all the bots refusing to fight each other and simply standing still until he killed one of them, at which point they teamed up and killed him. That's nice. It's been a long time since a new console company entered the marketplace, and now we have the Ouya.
No, I thought you had it.
No, I didn't.
You were sitting on it.
Despite its size, it packs all the essentials like HDMI, regular and micro USB slots, and Ethernet. Obviously, there's no disk drive. This thing is 100% digital, and I actually think it's quite a stylish little box, Hex.
Yeah, I do too. It's just a shame that the same level of quality hasn't carried over to the controller. I mean, the layout is fine. It's nice they've included a touchpad. It's just that the main buttons feel really flimsy, especially the triggers. Plus, our O button kept getting stuck onto the faceplate. In saying that, considering the Ouya bundle only costs around $100, I guess we shouldn't be expecting too much. And the best part is the open nature of the Ouya means you could just plug a 360 or PS3 controller in and use those instead.
But let's talk about the games, because that's what really matters. The premise of the Ouya is that every game needs to be free to play in some form. Some are completely free, and others have microtransactions. But most of them just give you a free demo, and after that you're prompted to purchase the full game. I like that you can sample everything for free, but you can't see the price until you press purchase when you're playing the game. And then you're only one confirmation away from being billed. I've already purchased one game I didn't actually mean to buy, and I think this could be a real problem for younger gamers who might rack up the bills.
Yeah, I had mixed feelings about the game store as well. I mean, I like the playlist provided by some of Ouya's developers. And with a couple of hundred games available already, there's no shortage to flick through, but they're pretty much all ports of Android touchscreen games. Some are old games you'll have heard of, like The Bard's Tale and Final Fantasy III, but mostly they're obscurities like this. Or this.
Understandably, the Ouya doesn't pack a lot of 3D power, but the game I found which demonstrated its potential the most was Shadowgun. It's a third-person shooter where your time is split between shooting guys from behind cover and kicking doors open. Yep, it's pretty much Gears of War light.
Yes, the hero John Slade is about as generic as his name suggests. I mean, even the voice actor didn't sound like he was interested in the plot.
Deciphering the break code will be very difficult.
Well, we don't have much time. My arrival made the evening news.
This game was impressive on touchscreen because it was a novelty having a console-like shooter on your phone. But when you port it back to the lounge room, it just highlights how shallow it is.
Yeah, I mean, the game is missing some pretty fundamental things. I mean, where's the melee or the big action set pieces? I mean, all you really get is corridor after corridor of dim-witted AI hiding behind cover. Shadowgun feels a little bit more like a tech demo than a real game, so I'm giving it 4.
I was impressed with how good a game could look coming from this tiny little box, but having said that, yes, it is terrible, and I'm giving it 4.
Next up, TowerFall. TowerFall takes the Smash Brothers brawling template and gives it a retro coat of paint.
Yes, this is one of the most minimal fighting games I've played in quite a while. Combos and command lists have been stripped away. The game's only weapon is a bow and arrow. Plus, your ammo is limited, so you really need to make sure you land your shots.
Yeah, I was stunned the first time I fired off my arrows and then realized I was completely out of ammo. So you learn pretty quickly to retrieve arrows from walls. Plus, then I discovered you could just jump on any opponent's head to kill them, so that was pretty good too. I mean, it's not much of an attack against a volley of arrows, but it's handy to know you're not completely defenseless when you're out of ammo. The game also has a handy dodge that you can use for evading and extending jumps. You know, once I had a handle on the basics, I actually had a lot of fun with the multiplayer.
Yeah, it was quite the hit in the office.
Well, that's a great start to the match for me. Oh no! Oh, that was such a fluke. I felt.
Oh, I thought he's still alive over there. I'm trying to get him.
What are we doing? There is no online supported in TowerFall though, or in any Ouya game actually, so you really need to rope in your friends and make sure you have 4 controllers handy to get the most out of this.
I didn't like that it only had a handful of training maps, which you blow through in about 10 minutes, but then there was no single-player campaign.
Yeah, I agree single player would have been great, but those 4-player matches were just so much fun, and this is definitely one of the better games we've looked at on this console, so I'm giving it 8.
I'm giving it 7.5. It'll be interesting to see where this console goes from here, because I could see it as a good source for indie games for your TV.
Yeah, and I really hope they pull it off, because the concept of a free-to-play console is a really good one.
Now, gaming addiction is a term we're all familiar with, but recently the medical profession made it official.
Goose takes a look at just what that means.
Teenagers are so addicted to video games.
Those addicted to the internet and online gaming. You could see the year-old boy has almost died after playing on his epic
Reports like these have only helped to sensationalise the problem, but the fact is, for a very real number of people, video games have had a devastating effect on their lives, as we discovered when we asked the Good Game community for their own stories.
Gaming became the only real world I knew.
I have no doubt that I was addicted to WoW. I placed it above everything else in my life.
I was in denial for a long period, still soaking up at least 10 hours of Halo a day, locked away in my dimly lit bedroom.
I had no contact with my friends outside other than those who played online.
It got to the point where I wasn't eating enough food because I just lost my appetite and I was so enthralled in the game.
Every gamer can relate to these stories on some level. We've all had moments where we could barely drag ourselves away from our favourite game. But is it fair to call these games addictive?
I'd make a number of key distinctions in this whole addiction field. One is between chemical addictions, things that involve substances, quite different to behaviours that people get stuck on. One of the classic ones has been gaming for a long time. There are whole sets of issues of overuse of those kind of interactive technologies. Now, I think that can be a problem, but, you know, whether it's better, I wouldn't describe it as addiction, but I would describe it as a set of problem behaviours when it starts to interfere with everything else you do and you really can't do anything else because you're stuck on this.
Internet use gaming disorder is now included in the DSM, the official manual used to diagnose mental illness.
The importance of a naming of a disorder in the DSM system is how much attention it attracts worldwide in the behaviour and in the condition.
If we know what it is, we can start to be consistent in the way that we identify individuals as having a problem. We can then conduct research and clinical trials, and we want to avoid classifying people who are merely healthy enthusiasts of video games as being problematic.
Goose is trapped forever!
In Australia, we're trying to work out how much good, how to do good, but also how to monitor harm. So we're actually at the forefront of trying to take this on.
It's done. Good job. So how can you tell if you or someone close to you is affected by such a disorder? What sort of signs should you look out for?
So some of the warning signs to look out for when it comes to your gaming getting a bit out of control is to overall look at the quality of your life in other areas decreasing as your gaming is increasing.
Really doing the thing over and over again and knowing that you want to stop, but you can't. You should be doing other things, but you can't. Other people are complaining at you to stop the thing and you say you're going to stop, but then you go back and you do it again. So there's clearly that loss of control over making the decision. And really, even though you think you're in control, the realisation that you're not.
The most interesting fact, perhaps, is that this addition to the DSM combines gaming with internet misuse, and many believe this is inaccurate and it might lead to further misdiagnosis.
There should be a distinction between social media, general internet use versus gaming, because the mechanics behind each are quite different. The way that they encourage the person to stay on, the mechanisms are significantly different. So the effect that it has on the person and the way that a person would extract themselves from those situations, the treatment, the approach of that needs to be considered and adjusted for that. If you do a kind of blanket approach to it, you're not going to be in best service of the person.
I think it's fine to have these things under the same broad umbrella because they've got in common the behavioural rather than the chemical, and the sets of characteristics that were in the older gaming environment more on your own, but still visually appealing, novelty-seeking, cognitively engaging, is now being added to very much through the internet, through the capacity to do it sociably with multiple others. So I think they've got more in common than they have different. And the same kinds of people tend to get stuck in both.
When it came down to real-life interactions, I could only really answer in smiles and nods.
Everyday things revolve around it, like when and what we eat for dinner and what time we go to bed.
We both put on in excess of 25 kilograms and lost contact with all of our true friends and family.
Before officially being recognised, many who sought help for a gaming disorder found themselves diagnosed in a similar fashion to someone with a gambling problem.
Gaming is more comparable to gambling in that it's what you would consider potentially a behavioural addiction. It's a kind of compulsion or need to repeat the same or a series of behaviours over and over for a kick.
What has happened in recent years with pathological gambling and making these things more formal disorders is to say some people are not really in control of this stuff and they may benefit from help. They may not be able to do it themselves. And psychology and behavioural medicine has a lot to offer in terms of our understanding of that. So instead of simply saying to people, you should stop, we can say, you know what, sometimes it's very hard to stop.
In the past, we've seen measures put in place to reduce the selling of substances that can go on to cause disorders such as alcoholism and smoking addiction. So with this new inclusion in the DSM, could we start to see legislation passed to reduce the selling of certain games? Or will warnings in games become even more prominent?
So the really upside of the whole DSM thing and calling disorders and whatever is encouraging help. It may be fun for a lot of people, but it's actually a problem for a set of people, and we need to have ways of perhaps constraining that in a public health-like way, just like we do with alcohol and tobacco and many other things, and with food products, etc. We do things to try and make those normal things safer.
Well, I think the greatest opportunity that the policymakers have is to do something about the online content, because there's a real lack of awareness of the pitfalls that can occur.
Just like the ever-shifting technology of games, the symptoms behind such a disorder are constantly changing and evolving too.
We need to not look just at how much time someone's spending or the sorts of games they're playing. That content and exposure is not as important as the psychological relationship between the person and the game.
It's really, really useful to keep in mind that games basically reinforce you to play a certain way. They incentivize you to keep playing, to come back and so on. And that develops the habit over time. So to understand that if you're wanting to change things around, it's going to involve some willpower and repetition.
I still play games online, but only a few hours a day.
My husband and I now prioritise. Our bills, food and other responsibilities must come first.
Getting help and getting back out into the real world were the hardest things I'd ever done.
What we're going to get into is a more sophisticated discussion For the internet generation, we've got to get into developing social rules that are appropriate. At the moment, that's a bit of a problem because most of the rules are being made up by kids as they go, and parents are still mainly horrified about what might be going on. So we just haven't quite worked it out. It's new. The technology is racing way ahead of the social rules, and in many ways, the health understandings, whether they're good or bad, that are associated with those behaviours.
I was a QA tester for Blizzard Entertainment on Mac Diablo.
The essence of Diablo is contained, for now.
I was a temporary employee that was only supposed to be there for about 2 weeks, and then I got asked to stick around, and eventually they went, hey, there's this little game called StarCraft. Why don't you stick around and QA that?
Go, go, go. You want a piece of me, boy? Give me some.
And then I realized, like, I just wanted to make gaming my life. It was a passion, and I was afforded the opportunity to do it. And so my attitude towards that was learn everything you can about the gaming industry, never be afraid to ask questions, so for anybody to kind of progress if they want to make that a life career. Volunteer for every opportunity that you can to understand how gaming as an industry works. I think that's really a key.
We shall win through, no matter the cost.
Good game. Place the hammer in the seal.
I remember when Black Lake was a nice place to live.
Neverwinter is based on the tabletop RPG Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, and 4th edition actually borrowed some ideas from video games. This isn't a sequel to the much-loved BioWare game Neverwinter Nights, but it does take inspiration from it.
There's a few things that Neverwinter does better than any MMO I've played before, but there's also a few things that might be an issue for some. Let's start with the world itself. If you somehow manage to find the tiny checkbox that lets you put up all the sliders, it becomes quite a good-looking game. Oh, this is quite pretty. It's no Guild Wars 2, but Hex, I don't know if a game can ever be as pretty as Guild Wars 2.
Yes, and unlike Guild Wars 2, it doesn't follow the same kind of open world format. You just don't get a clear sense of the world from these interconnecting maps I found. But it's the dungeoning and rich combat which will draw you in, and there is certainly plenty of that.
I love the combat. I think it's great. The animations are so reactive and everything hits where it should. There's no mouse cursor in the combat, so targeting is just with the reticule, and I had no issues with the targeting, Hex. I think that's a first for an MMO.
Yeah, the aiming mechanic is just incredible, and this may sound like a small thing to get excited about, but I think the days of tabbing through enemies should be far behind us, Bajo, and this is a leap in the right direction. Ah, and the ragdoll, hilarious.
Leave him alone.
Yes, proper ragdoll in an MMO. I think that might actually be a first as well, or at least it hasn't been done this well before. It's so satisfying when a hit lands perfectly and everyone just goes flying.
Thanks for summoning the spider curse.
I also like that the combat is based around cooldowns with the abilities. It just feels more modern not to have to worry about a rage meter or a mana pool. That kind of strategy I find more fun. It's good just being able to walk into a room or up to a set of goons with a plan, execute that plan, and have it all go to plan.
Well, we've tried all the classes and they're all really fun, though I think D&D players may find them a little bit restrictive. There are only 5 classes at the moment and they're all very set in their roles and weapons.
Yeah, that was a little disappointing, but somewhat expected as well. I thought they did a pretty good job with the character customization, though. There's plenty of races to choose from and lots of sliders. You can have big hands if you want, and a little short guy, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, there's some nice detail on the gear as well, although the gear itself is pretty generic. You won't find a lot of variety in terms of the types of weapons and armor you can equip.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have gear which looked like it came from a specific area that you were questing in. On the class side of things, the skill tree as far as we've played it doesn't offer heaps of choice, bar a few points here and there. The real customization comes from your feats tree. The choices you make here empower the abilities that you've chosen to put into your moveset. So there is some freedom in the way you want to play.
No surprise here, but I rolled rogue, and I thought the stealth was done really well. When one class can go into permanent stealth in a game, it becomes really hard to cater for that ability in quest design. So here they've hit a middle ground well, and in fact all the classes are just pure fun.
Yeah, normally I just have one main because I feel like playing any other characters is a betrayal to that main.
I get that.
Yeah, but here I actually have more than one. I was happy to. Donk. Although that's also a bad thing because I've already spent 40 hours in this game and I just don't have that much time for this many characters in my life. Although I spent a good part of that time in the game's content creator called The Foundry, building the worst dungeon in the world, Jimmy the Rat.
All right, after you guys.
And you can go online and rate my dungeon and play it and offer tips, but I don't recommend it because my dungeon is pretty bad.
It's pretty bad, but to be fair, I did have a good time exploring your very creative and zany approach to game design, Bajo. Ratty McTony. Though I was a bit alarmed by the fact that the quest giver kept vomiting repeatedly while trying to deliver his quest info. Go and find out why he wants you dead. What's it gonna be? Vomits. Oh, by the way, the king wants him dead and has authorized me to dish out a reward. Vomits again! Also, your boss battle was a bit underwhelming, no offense.
You guys ready for magic? It's just the final boss. It's pretty weak though, Jimmy the Rat's dead.
I killed Jimmy?
Yeah.
I missed it!
I know, fair point. It is a powerful content creator though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and this is really where the game embraces the creativity of D&D. Anyone can make a dungeon, room by room, edit and write all the dialogue and objectives, and anyone can go and play that for free. I mean, it's pretty incredible just how polished and how well everything works, Bajo. And the best part is, some of the top-rated dungeons out there at the moment are better than a lot of the developer content.
Yeah, absolutely, and some of them are hilarious, like this Voltron boss. But the best ones are the quests which stick to the lore and put the right enemies with the right storylines. And it's those ones where the real love for Dungeons & Dragons shines through. It's really hard to make a compelling level, and it's quite inspiring when you play one that is done right. I've gone back to my dungeon and tried to think about ways to surprise adventurers and play with audio cues and do things like using light and movement to lead you around. I didn't execute any of that very well, but I got a lot of joy actually watching you play my dungeon, and a lot of frustration when you weren't going the right way, which is my fault.
I'm just exploring my environment.
See the falling rubble?
Where's the falling rubble?
It says no, don't go that way.
I don't feel like that was clear. To me, it looks more interesting. Like, that's where I want to go.
I understand. Also, some of the dungeons are in other languages, in French, and Goose and I got stuck in one, which was a puzzle, and we couldn't work out what to do.
Okay, here's the manuscript. It's a puzzle in French. What do we do? I say this one.
Oh, no.
I don't recommend those ones unless you want a unique challenge, or if you know French, I think you'll be okay.
I really did like, though, that your character's level scales when you do Foundry quests. And it's a solid option if you want to try another class but not have to repeat all the content.
My biggest criticism of this game, though, is that I found it very easy. I think I've only died maybe 3 or 4 times, and in fairness, I did have a companion mage with me the whole time who is pretty overpowered, but still, death isn't great, but I need to have a challenge, and I felt like I was on autopilot for a lot of this.
Well, if you wanted a challenge, why didn't you just not use your companion?
Because he's there and I had him, and it gave me an advantage. Plus the ragdoll, when he does his Fuss Radar thing, it's pretty great. I think if you switch to one of the animal companions, such as this ferocious honey badger, it's a bit more fun because I found they were all a bit rubbish. He doesn't care.
There are a few luxury items and leg ups in Neverwinter, and pretty soon you realise that microtransactions have been very cleverly woven into many parts of this game. The question is, does that ruin the experience, or is it fair?
Yes, and the model is quite confusing in this game, so Hex, I think we need a whiteboard.
I love whiteboards.
Right, there are 3 currencies in the game. Let's start with gold. That you pick up from kills and get from vendoring stuff. You can't use gold in the auction house. It only buys potions and not much else worth your time in our opinion, except for a 50% speed mount.
God, kind of horse is that?
It's not my finest work, I'll give you that.
I couldn't even salvage it. What is that?
It's his tail.
The second and real currency is astral diamonds. You earn this by doing daily quests, selling things on the auction house, skirmishes, and buy a few other little things. They buy auction house gear and companions and much more. It can also be used to speed up crafting and is required to remove socketed runes from gear.
The third currency is Zen, which you purchase from the game's website. If you play the stock market, you can trade Zen for astral diamonds and vice versa. Zen buys keys to unlock mystery lock boxes. It also buys character slots and faster mounts. Another wonderful horse.
It looks like he's fighting, but he's just going really fast.
I see. I can draw a little honey badger here. So as you can see, this layering of multiple currencies is quite confusing, and that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think we got that right, but to be honest, we're still unclear on a few little things.
Yeah, and a big thank you to Tata's Reddit post, which helped us decipher a lot of that pay model. What do you think of this model, Bajo?
I think it's easy to get up in arms whenever there's any kind of microtransaction, but on the whole, I think it's all right. Respeccing your character is overpriced, though. That's a core mechanic of an MMO, and I do that 2 or 3 times a week, so at $3 a pop, that felt a little high to me. But this MMO doesn't hold you hostage like many other free-to-play games do. I'd say I've dropped less than $50 into this game with no regrets, and that was mainly for my fast mount, which I only got when I hit level 20. And you don't need that fast mount, that's the key thing. You can get a 50% one easy enough. The faster ones are just a luxury item. And when I stepped back and looked at how much I spent on this and other MMOs, you get an incredible amount of content here for free.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but there are still a few aspects of this model that really annoy me, such as the lockboxes that drop. You're given these as a reward, but you can't open them without a key. I know you could go and grind some diamonds and trade that for Zen to buy them, but essentially you're being given a gift that you then have to pay to open. And this is the kind of thing that really gives free-to-play games a bad name.
Yeah, I can rarely resist the lure of the mystery box. The key, what's gonna be? And it's just borrowed runestones. There is one other thing that we couldn't test out because it's endgame, but apparently the best and strongest enchantments in the game can only realistically be purchased with a bunch of cash. And that is a bit worrying if it's true, because those enchantments carry over into PvP.
Your team dominates.
The good news is, I really enjoyed the PvP. I spent a lot of time in it. There's only 3 maps, which is a shame, so I hope they expand that, but it all worked and there was very little lag.
I do have a few issues with this model, but it's nice to see a game that genuinely encourages a flourishing creative community as well. I had fun with this, maybe not as much as you, it didn't draw me in quite as much, but I still think it's worth an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think if you're playing a game like this, a free-to-play game, and that business model makes you regret spending money in the game, then that's a really bad thing. So it won't be for everyone, but at the end of the day, I'm getting a huge amount of value out of this game. I want to go and build stories and dungeons and share them with people and actually see what they think of them and get better at them. So I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
So did you guess the sound for this week? It was the boot up sound of the GameCube when you held down Z on the controller. A small little square console in honor of another small little square console we checked out this week.
Next week we give our consoles a rest. It's all about PC as we have a look at Mag Runner, Unepic and Gunpoint.
Plus the creatively titled war game Airland Battle.
I wonder what that game's about.
So I think it's about war games.
In the air?
In the air.
What about the land?
And then there'll be battles.
Also, you can join Hex and I right now on Reddit for an Ask Us Anything, so come along and ask us anything.
Till next time, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Bajo out. Hex, I have a severe injury.
Oh, what is it?
I stubbed my W finger and look, it's bleeding. It bled. There's blood still.
That's pretty tough. I burnt all my fingers in the stove once, and every time I would, use the trigger for gaming, I'd be like, ow. Oh, my gaming fingers.
These precious fingers. It's like,
we should get them insured.
How much would you insure your hands for?
$10,000.
Per hand?
Yeah.
5,000 for the left, 10,000 for the right.
further information about internet use gaming disorder, please visit abc.net.au/goodgames.